Okay, we're recording. So, hi everyone, Mercury
So
here
you're
with
Mercury, right?
Mercury, yeah. And Ryan's the other co-host
Okay,
of
I just
the channel.
wanted to make sure.
He's just really busy
Okay.
right now, so I didn't even worry about reaching out to him to see if he wanted to join us. I just know he's got a lot going on. So for
Right.
so for everyone watching, I'll start by saying I watched a video recently that Paul put out, and it was your discussion with David Fuller.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end of it, Paul
Mm-hmm.
just says, "Please go over and support her channel and comment." And so I went over, left a comment.
Yeah.
Uh, as I was commenting, I realized that I've got a channel I could invite her on. That sort of popped. I was just going to write hi, sent by Paul, and I spontaneously offered an invitation. Andrea was nice enough to take me up on it. And so my whole
Mm-hmm.
goal here is just to do what Paul ordered and offer some support to Andrea. So why don't we start with you introducing yourself to our audience, and go ahead, plug whatever you want, your channel, your Twitter. Let's see if we can get you a couple new subscribers.
Oh, that would be so awesome. Yeah, I'm Andrea with the bangs. Like that's my sort of uh nickname that I accidentally fell into on Twitter. So I didn't mean for that to happen. It just apparently a lot of people can't pull off bangs and I can. So
Yeah, and I've noticed that can happen when you get active. You can just get known as something you didn't choose. In some
right.
comments and stuff, people refer to me as just the lunatic now. And that was because the first podcast I did, Andrew just titled it something about my talk with a lunatic. And yeah, like that's my specialty. I'm bipolar,
Mm-hmm.
and that's like my special insight is,
Okay.
uh, is what I've learned from with madness as a teacher. Yeah, but so I just started
Right.
getting called the lunatic um, casually, and then when I
Yeah.
started, and yeah, it just fell into. So now, if I ever stream live, it's just called Lunatic Live. But even that title, I
Right.
just fell into. It wasn't something I
Yeah.
particularly chose.
Well, and well, I mean, at least you don't have to worry about changing your hairstyle though. For me, if I change this up, I don't know where like this is my logo for my podcast. It's
Mhm.
called She Wonders Why, and then I have the little me with my eyes looking. Anyway, and so I have it by Andrea with the bangs. I don't know if you can see that.
Yeah.
So I kind of feel like I don't plan on changing. Oh, I like your mug.
Oh, Jabba the Hutt.
That's great. That just came out of nowhere. I was all excited about my mug and I'm like, it's my little logo. And you're like, you think that's a mug? This is a mug. Like, anyway. So yeah, where are we? Oh, I got just distracted. Oh yeah, so my nickname, yeah. So that's just sort of what I leaned into the nickname. I don't plan on changing my hair anytime soon because it works with my glasses. I didn't bring my glasses, they're upstairs, but they're really thick rimmed. And so the forehead was just not good with the glasses. So I'm just leaving it for now. So that's my YouTube channel name is Andrea with the bangs. And that kind of encompasses, I had to think about this because I'm like, what is this about? So like, why am I having different names? So I have the Andrea with the bangs is my YouTube channel, which encompasses everything. And then I have my interviews where I speak with people, and that is under the name She Wonders Why, which I also have a podcast for. And that's the only ones I switch over from YouTube over to podcast form as well are my interviews. So that's why I decided to sort of have like an overall conglomerate name, Andrea with the Bangs Inc. No, that's my, but that's sort of like YouTube dot like slash, Andrea with the Bangs. And that's that one. And then my interview time is with Andrea with the Bangs. But I'm really not used to talking about myself because I'm the one interviewing people.
Okay.
And I find it very interesting because a lot of people who I interview they're all, well, you've got the hard part. I just have to sit here and answer your questions. But for me, I only ask people I find interesting or that I find a topic interesting, so that that they are an expert in. And so for me, I don't find it difficult at all to come up with questions. Only I remember one, maybe two interviews that I remember being a little worried, but it actually, we made it through. It was no lulls. So, but for me, I don't find it difficult if I'm speaking with someone who I find interesting. There's no problem coming up with the questions. And I don't do a ton of prep. I do a little bit of reading people's articles, just to get a feel for the topic, but I don't write questions out. I do point form, but maybe 2 or 3 points, not a ton. Some of them I don't write anything because I'm like, I know this will be like with Paul. When I interviewed Paul, I don't think I had anything written. So, sorry, Paul Vanderklay, for those of you who don't know who that is.
Yeah,
But,
I think most
yes.
people watching this will know who Paul is.
Yeah. So I do find it a little daunting I'll give my little anecdotes. And with Paul, I think I did that too much. The interview I did with him was a little bit different than most of the time because I really just stopped. I just had all these questions and I'm for myself, like very personal. And I was like, I don't care that it's being recorded. I'm just gonna like let loose. And then I just interrupted him so much because I was like, but why? But why? But most of the time, I'm a little bit more composed than in that interview. But anyway, so I'm a little bit unsure how my answers are gonna come out because I've watched an interview that I've done last year, the first one I did with a friend, and I watched back and I was like, oh no, that's how I am. It was a live stream and someone made a joke about me, like, how many Red Bulls has this girl had? And I was a little, what? Ugh. And then I watched it over and I'm like, no wonder they thought that. Like, man, you slow down, girl. So we'll see how this goes.
Well, no, why would you have to slow down? Sometimes somebody rambling on at a high speed, high energy, it's good entertainment.
It's true. I suppose it depends on your taste. You're right. But what I connect with the best, what I prefer is, well, I like an answer that's a bit more coherent and I think out loud. So that's the problem, is that if I need to refine how I think out loud for me to be satisfied with it. I want to get rid of the likes and the ums. Those are the two. And I'm pretty sure that's typical, public speaking 101.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
and so when I'm interviewing people, I don't have to refine it much because it's just a question and then I let them go. So as I just say so that's sort of where I'm at in my I keep saying now, gosh, stop worrying about this girl. No, so I am just not used to going on in an interview setting where I'm not the one asking the questions. So,
well, if you want, at any point, we can just switch it and you can take over if you're more comfortable with that. I have nothing planned, so.
I do have a question for you, actually.
Sure.
So I watched that interview you sent me of you guys chatting with Paul Vanderklay, mm-hmm. And your hair looks much like altered.
Yeah, it's winter. I just don't shave in the winter. I fall into my depression matched up.
But you had this, and you had
yeah, I had a mohawk last summer. At the end of the fall, I shaved my head once. And yeah, shaved it off, and since then just haven't cut my hair. But it's not really about fashion. I'm pretty much a hermit.
Okay.
Yeah, like sometimes I'll have a mohawk if my wife and kids want me to have it or something.
Yeah.
But left to my own devices, I just pull out the clippers once a week in the summer and shave my whole head.
Okay.
And I tend to just let it grow in the winter. It's not fashion.
No, it looks
Really
very
so much
cozy. It's very cozy. I like the.
Yeah, it's warmer in the winter, and when I'm depressed, it's hard to get myself to do anything, and a beard just happens when I don't do anything.
Right. Well, so is it that seasonal depression that comes with winter?
No, it's not as simple as that because I'm clearly bipolar. Like the first two times, my first two cycles, I was. Now I'm noticing myself saying because you brought that up.
I know, it's because I put it out there.
And I don't know how much I regularly do that because I can't stand watching myself. So I just allowed myself off the hook with that completely. I also barely know how to use, and once we've done recording this, Grizz or Ryan are going to take care of uploading it and everything. I don't even have to look at it.
That's great.
I'm not worried so much about how I'm coming across.
Oh, I need to get to that spot someday.
And I can just show up in whatever state I'm in, and the audience and people I talk to are all just fine with that. I find I don't have to put on any sort of persona whatsoever. If I'm depressed, I can just show up depressed. I can show up manic. And people just seem to like the authenticity. I
think you're right. I think that people have enough staged, so they probably know what is authentic and what's real, and they probably connect with that.
Yeah, some people seem to really like that. Also, a lot of people with problems like that I'm so open with it and that I'm really at peace with my own nature. Although, all that spiraled off of when I first went crazy at 27. My first two cycles were 3 years long. And with bipolar type 1, your cycle is often about 2/3 depression, 1/3 mania.
Okay.
And my cycles are always that, but the first two times it was about a year of mania or up to a year of mania, although it was broken by institutionalization and heavy meds.
Okay.
Then 2 years of straight depression. So twice I've been through 2 years of depression. So I'm entirely capable of going through an entire summer depressed, and I can go through a winter manic.
Oh, okay.
Once I stopped trying to run away from being crazy, trying to deny it or trying to just get better and force myself back to my old self. And when I just tried to make the most of being what I was now. And at first, my main goals were just okay, when I'm manic, I've got to keep the psychosis under control so I do not cause a problem for others and don't get institutionalized. And when I'm depressed, I can't kill myself. And it's those were my goals for years. And as I adapted to being the new lunatic that I was in a somewhat shamanic way, and I went into isolation for a couple of years at this point. Didn't have a phone, didn't have internet, didn't have a car. I had my supplies dropped off. No one visited me. And it just naturally, my cycle matched up to the year. Started that instead of 3 years, it was 1 year long. And it just naturally synced up with the seasons. And it goes much more smoothly that way. Because I find here in Canada, there is a energetic cycle to nature that matches the bipolar cycle. In the spring, nature comes alive. It explodes with energy. In the fall, everything starts getting heavy. The bears are ready to go to sleep. The trees basically die, the leaves fall, everything freezes over. And I've the madness itself follows to a certain degree some of the old myths.
Yeah.
Cycles of rebirth, the old forest god where the male would die every winter and the female energy was eternal. So
I'll take eternal female energy. Sure.
So
where in Canada are you?
I'm in Quebec, not far from Ottawa.
Oh, okay. I'm in Alberta, so we're rivals. Just kidding, but not really, kind of though. Um, yeah, I feel like in Alberta we don't quite have, the cycle is more tiny spring, long summer, tiny fall, long winter, but mostly long winter. That's what I feel like ours is. It's not quite that 4-season typical structure that, that the myths are about, because I feel like the winter god just rules all.
And what about you? Do you find the seasons affect you much, or are you
I,
fairly
you
stable?
know what? I don't find them, except I just don't like not seeing the sun much in the winter. It's dark at 4:30,
Mm-hmm.
and then 7:30 ish it comes up. It's starting to get a bit better now, but man, in that December, early, like December, early January, it's just so, I just don't like it. But I find I didn't actually know this until I lived with a cousin of mine in Grand Prairie in northern Alberta, that my like your equilibrium of like what you naturally are, like when you're not smiling or when you're not frowning, you're just like, like my resting personality space is on the more positive side. And I did not know that until, because she was more on the like more half glass empty negative side, not in a negative way, just that's just how she described herself. And she was like, yeah, you're lucky that you just have your natural state is on the more chipper side. And I'm like, isn't everyone's, you know?
No,
And
not at
and
all.
she's like, oh no, no. And she explained about herself. So I sort of, I mean, I have sensitivities that, where I'm like, for my husband, I think back to when we first started dating, and you didn't call when you said, I have extreme ups and downs when something causes it, but but not quite like depression. I don't know. I don't quite know that world. I've had, grief. Both of my parents have passed away. I don't really know the grief. For my father passed away when I was 10 months old. And my mom passed away when I think I was 24. So 9 years ago. And so I know that, and I've heard depression sort of actually from Jordan Peterson. The way he described his depression was like, if you wake up in the morning and everyone you love has died, but they haven't died, but you feel like that's where you feel.
It can
And
be
so,
completely detached from reality, so that
yes,
if you're in full-blown depression, you could have a day where like 100 wonderful things happen, and if you're
it doesn't.
seriously enough depressed, it won't have any effect on you, and you could even end up feeling horrible that all this wonderful stuff is going on and you can't appreciate it.
Right. So that's the first time and this was only maybe 2 years ago that I remember hearing this explanation. I think he was talking with Joe Rogan one of those times. And it just clicked. Oh, that's what people experience who are going through depression. And then I sort of relayed that to how I felt when my mom passed away. So that's a natural feeling. Of course, it's not a bad thing to have grief, but it's sort of, there's a reason for it. But I have never had depression outside of like grief of a death of a loved one. So I could kind of understand reaching over to that experience. So I've never experienced quite depression, but I have experienced grief. And so I can kind of like, have some empathy for that, I think. But yeah, it's something that I guess it's a blessing, I guess, that I have a more upbeat personality, and I'm not usually affected much by that kind of stuff. But I mean, I love summer. Like, I definitely have a preference for heat, but I'm not quite seasonally depressed or anything like that. But I just realized I definitely did not even talk about any of the content on my channel.
We're in sync there. I was just going to loop back to that. I was just going to say, well, that was all
I'm sorry,
fun.
I totally stole it.
So let's go back to why
Okay.
you started your YouTube channel and what interests you're passionate about exploring there.
Okay, so it started before the foundation was laid. I guess, you know, like the catalyst of me kind of being in this space was listening to Jordan Peterson. I came into contact with him. My sister sent me a video about him. It was the video where he talks about, you know, do you believe in God? And he's like, well, it depends on what you mean by God. And then he goes on and someone interviewed this guy interviewing him. My sister sent it to me and she was like, I think that this guy's a Christian, but I can't tell. And then she sent a second video and I didn't watch the first one. I watched that one second. She was like, but watch this. I want you to see this guy. So she sent a second clip of him explaining about the resurrected Christ and what he thought about it. And that was where she was like, oh, I don't think so from this answer, but still watch it. So I watched that one first and then I watched the other one. So it's interesting because the person interviewing him, I still remember it. I could tell knew what he was doing because, like, with regards to theology, because he was like, but wait, do you believe in the bodily resurrection of Christ? You know? And so I'm like, oh, you know what you're doing. I have a background in Christian studies with a minor in history. So I do have some, I guess, the schooling in theology a bit. And so, I mean, and I've been a Christian for forever. So I could just tell, like, oh, this guy, he knows how to ask the question to get to the meat of it. So, you know, Peterson's notorious for, oh, my sister's calling me. I'm going to decline it. Sorry. That's the thing about having a Mac and an iPhone is they're connected. Anyway, so they, where was I? Peterson. It's funny. I was speaking of the devil. I was just saying how she sent me this clip and then she calls me. So anyway, so he said he tried to get out of it initially, like, oh, well, I mean, the spirit of the idea of Christ is definitely amongst us. I mean, it's still around us today. But then he's like, no, the literal bodily resurrection. And that's when Peterson was like, I don't know. But he had a moments of waiting and thinking. You could tell. That's maybe where I get my wanting to slow down, because I always admire if someone is asked a question and they can slow down and actually think and be like, I don't care that you have to wait because I'm not going to just blurt out an answer. I want to think about it. So I admire that. So, and his answer was, I don't know. And so that's sort of how and then I didn't even know about the political stuff till a little bit after a few days of diving into his lectures. And I didn't really care about that. I mean, I thought it was like, oh, that's crazy. But I was really, really taken by his lectures. And then, but, you know, as I got through all of his lectures, I went through all of his biblical lectures in a summer. That was all I watched one summer. And then I got into his interviews with Rubin and Rogan. And then I started seeing these other suggested videos of these other intellectuals popping up, the Weinsteins and, you know, Sam Harris and the other, you know, Christina Hoff Sommers and the other group of the intellectual dark web before they were called the intellectual dark web. So, and then I watched one panel of Heather Hying and Brett Weinstein and Peter Boghossian, and they were talking about something about how people censor themselves if they're not the proper, you know, part of the tribe of wherever it is that they live. And I've sort of changed my view on that. I think I guess to clarify, because the idea was that the loudest, and this is somewhat true still, that the loudest voices are the sort of activist voices where it's 10% or 5% of the population, but they're the loudest.
Mm-hmm.
and they speak the loudest, and they're the loudest on social media. And I believe there is some evidence for some of that. And it depends on where you live. If you live on the coasts, particularly in the States, but here in Canada, you know, Vancouver and, well, maybe on the West Coast, I'm not sure, or maybe Toronto area, and on the coasts of the States, there is a sort of, you know, in Silicon Valley, in the academy, there's a sort of, you follow this, and if you're too vocal on Twitter, watch your job. I understand that there's an element there. I don't know. It depends on where you live. Like, I don't think that's necessarily true for everyone now. And I'm trying to find that out, the nuances to that. I'm actually going to talk about diversity of thought with the professor on Friday. So we'll get to the bottom of it there. But I started off being like, well, I'm a stay-at-home mom, and I don't have to worry about losing my job, and I want to speak to people and get the message out there, whatever the message is. I just wanted to speak to people and make it available because I wasn't worried about losing a job. So that's sort of how it initially, my channel started. But as it continued and continues on, I found myself sort of, the motivation for my discussions, they were really for me to sort out that's the name of it. I didn't even do that on purpose. Freudian slip, sort out what I think, like sort myself out. I started off on Twitter with an idea of what I thought was wrong. And then as I started speaking to people, there were some critiques or criticisms coming off of the people I was admiring. And I still like all these people. I'm not going to be, you know, the person who comes out and be like an IDW hater or anything like that. It helped me to get them off of pedestals. Do you know what I mean? They're
Okay.
human beings. And it's dangerous, actually, the way that we do venerate the people we look up to. And I feel like I'm now in a better place than I initially was, because, like, for example, if I met Jordan Peterson back when I was first listening to his lectures, I probably would have like died and felt like I met a sort of messiah.
Really?
Yeah, I just loved him so much, and I still do. But if I met him now, I think I would be a bit more, a cool person, you know, which I think is a bit more healthy.
Yeah, it's the phenomenon. I think it was David Fuller talking, I forget who, but I think it was on Rebel Wisdom that I heard the term golden shadow. That there's the shadow projection where we project the dark in ourselves we're in denial of, but there's also the golden shadow that we can project onto people. And that's just like an archetypal thing, that as long as you're in denial of your own golden self, unaware that you can be good enough to a certain level, and you look to project it onto other people so that then you can just latch onto them to get your own golden shadow, the golden parts of you you're missing. And so I think, like Peterson would say, what's important there, from before that golden shadow broke and you realized, Peterson's just, because I never had that with Peterson. I'd met some celebrities I looked up to when I was younger and made friends and broke that cycle, like saw how much we're all just people. But the opportunity in that is to see what it is your own soul's calling out for. So what did you project onto him? So once you remove the golden projection and make him just a person, don't throw all that gold away. Look at it as, okay, this is what a deep part of me is longing for. So when you were still projecting on him, what was it that you were projecting?
I actually know exactly what it was. It was, he awoke this, it's something that I have always thought interesting, but I hadn't thought about in a while. And those, I mean, I want to call them Jungian archetypes, but it's age old. The archetype, the story, the hero's journey, I know with Joseph Campbell, that sort of, whatever different thinker that has developed those things, I when I was young, I was thinking about this today actually. When I was young, my mom had an Encyclopedia Britannica, because that was our Google, and I'm 34. Like, it wasn't that long ago. So, I mean, I would always get out the M for mythology, and I would always look through particularly the Greek mythology, and they had a chart of the different Greek and Roman gods and goddesses, the same name, the same different names, but same god or goddess, and of the different whatever of Rome and of Greece. So I would just love reading them, and I read the little stories. And there was another book that my mom had with the evolution of the alphabet, and beginning with the A is the ox head, and then it would go through the different iterations of the letter A, and I think it ended with the Roman alphabet. So I just really I like ancient anything, but particularly the, I guess, classical, like Greek and Roman studies sort of stories. But any mythology, really. I liked Egyptian as well. I love the story, and it reminded me of, I studied Christianity and theology, and I did Christian history. My minor was in Christian history, so I studied like theology alongside of the history of Christianity, and so I studied this story, but looking at outward and seeing the other things that are reflected in Christianity, or that Christianity reflects, because some of them predate Christianity. I think it's just, I hadn't thought, when did I get, when I found Peterson, when I found these lectures, I hadn't done that sort of like head stuff in a long time, because it was in 2018, or maybe it was the summer of 2017. That was when I watched all of the Peterson stuff, and then the following summer was when I started thinking about getting my YouTube channel. And so I think I'd been a mom for about, how many years ago? It was 2017, 3 years ago. So I think I'd been a mom for about 5 years, and I missed engaging with the sort of, the order and chaos meeting. I missed walking that road where you're just engaged and time goes away, and I think that's what it was for me, that he's still of the group, he's my favorite, because those are the things that I love, the mythologist part of him that he explains. Those are the things, and I actually am looking at my own sort of faith journey, because he also gave me a sort of different look at evolution when he explains about the snakes in ourselves, and why the snake is such an appropriate symbol for the, in Hebrew it's like the Satan, the accuser or the adversary. And that's why he is everywhere in all of the cultures, the snake, it makes sense. And then their eyes being opened, and it kind of intersects with the sort of evolutionary story of our human ancestors. So that kind of made me change over to be like, okay, I was an old earth person since university, writing a paper, and I couldn't find any evidence for young earth. So I've been an old earth believer for a while, but I couldn't make that jump to evolution, because I was just, how can I believe that people came from like ape-like ancestors? And so I watched that biblical series, and I switched over to be like, okay, I think I can believe it without losing my faith. So does that make sense? When he goes over the Genesis account and he explains all the evolutionary things happening to us within the Adam and Eve story. So that made me sort of switch my perspective, but I still thought that faith and the science of that could cohabit. But then I just was surrounded by these staunch atheists on Twitter and I had to defend my faith, and it was really hard because I haven't done that kind of thing since university, when I enjoyed arguing with Mormons. but anyway, so this has been a long story. So I'll wrap up. I have been really wrestling with, okay, how do I look at natural, like nature, like natural, I guess, general revelation? How do I reconcile that with the specific revelation of the Bible? And it's just, I actually wrote Paul. Paul and I have a mutual friend, Benjamin Boyce. He's been, do you know him? Paul has been on Benjamin's channel before. And so that's how I was introduced to Paul, was on Benjamin's channel. And so I actually emailed Paul, and Paul doesn't remember this because I asked him. This is before he knew even who I was. So I asked a question about basically what I'm describing, like, how do I reconcile these things when all these atheist friends of mine are going at me, this sort of trying to lure me into atheism with this, well, he's unfalsifiable, and so if something's unfalsifiable, then it isn't like sound or whatever. So I wrote him that. I asked him, and something along those lines, and he brought up about, I brought up stories as well. I don't remember what I wrote, but I brought up about stories, and he actually took the story thing, and he was like, it makes sense that a story that in our story, it didn't make sense until the story became flesh and dwelt among us, aka the incarnation became flesh and dwelt among us. Like, doesn't that make sense that stories mean so much to humans that God was like, this doesn't actually make sense until I come into your story? And that was what sort of made me understand the incarnation. We grew up learning, oh, Jesus died for your sins. Great. And so it sort of brought me from the trying to look at it from the scientific understanding to that archetypal, the I don't know, like voice calling in the wilderness. I know there's that passage, is it Ezekiel? I just heard Paul quoted about the eternity being written on our hearts. So he talked about that in your chat and the chat I had with him. So I guess that's a popular one. So it sort of, that kind of came around with me. So that's what I think the story of our human existence and the different iterations of that story, that's what calls out to me, and the meaning of what that is what I'm sort of looking to focus on. I kind of do the culture war stuff a little bit, but now I'm wanting to move to focus more on what is this meaning crisis, and what are solutions moving forward. So that's a very long-winded explanation about my channel and where I'm at right now.
Yeah, and I saw your conversation with Paul, and you said in it that you'd, like, fairly recently accepted evolution. And so before you accepted evolution, who was it, or where did you get the idea that evolution and Christianity were not compatible?
Oh, very much my Christian community / my mother, and that.
Okay, so that was just how it was always introduced.
How I was raised.
As a child?
Yes, since I was a child, and it's a very North American, Southern particular, not just Southern, but my mom's from Southern Baptist, like, roots. She was from that church, and it's sort of that traditional, because the thing is, it's not, I've actually looked into this. I interviewed this guy, oh shoot, what was his name? Michael something. Sorry, Michael, if you're watching this. Michael Zimmerman. So he's an evolutionary biologist, and he runs something called the Clergy Letter Project. And I asked him, where does this sort of animosity between old earth and new earth come from? Because I actually know some of the church fathers were perfectly fine with age theory, like the age theory of like that the days weren't literal 24 hours days. So where did this come from? And I guess it comes from that sort of that in that traditional I think it's in the America. It's rooted in Americana, in like the good Christian Americana. There was that Scopes trial. Have you heard of that? I don't remember. I just remember it was teaching evolution. They wanted to teach evolution in school, and there was a whole hubbub about it. I think it's because that dude in England at whatever time did the whole 6,000 year generation calculation. And I don't remember when that was, but it was just really accepted in traditional conservative Christianity, particularly in the United States, but in Canada, I think as well. And I'd say only the past 100 years. So it wasn't even right when Darwin came around. It was a little bit more like in the 20s. I think.
I was raised Catholic.
Yeah.
My mother's extremely Catholic. Like
Yeah.
I was altar boy all through my youth. And I went to Catholic schools, and we had religion class every day, but we also had science.
So you were fine with evolution?
Yeah, like I was taught evolution, and I was taught science in the way any atheist would have been. And I was also taught religion classes. So I never had that put into me at a young age that those needed to be in conflict.
Really? It's like a conservative Protestant thing, I think. It's very odd. I'm around people who are like that, the evil, they think it's evil.
Okay, but so that idea that, okay, this is creepy and evil that we came from apes. Like, how creepy is that?
Right.
But the Bible says God took a lump of clay and breathed into an animated lump of clay is just as ridiculous and just as creepy.
I know.
Also, you could look at it like the clay is a metaphor simply for organic matter. And that God spoke into organic matter, and over time, man was created.
I know. And it's the thing is, and I know Jews have no problem with evolution either, as far as I know, because they have their own religious scholars who know ancient Hebrew really well. And, I think that it's just something about, because I know for me, that what was holding me back was, but we're not special if we came from something that, I don't know why. I'm having trouble remembering.
If there was a whole okay, think of it this way.
Okay.
If for eons we went from single cell organisms that adapted and evolved into fish, into this for thousands of years, giant lizards grew and died off, and all of this led to eventually monkeys forming various forms of humans, and ours being the only form of human that survived the past however many 100,000 years. How special are we that all of this, billions and billions of life forms evolved step by step to create us?
Very true.
Like how?
Well, you know what? I'm remembering what it is. Because there's all these different humanoid type individuals or species. I know that there are like Homo habilis and Homo erectus and like Neanderthals and the other names that I can't remember right now. What do they get souls? Who gets the first soul? Like Adam and Eve. And I do think that the stories, like what Peterson says, how ancient these stories are, and we can't take them quite literally, but they're the best version of any story that was true. So it's the best one, like the best way that it can come about telling the creation story is what we have for the West anyway. And so but it's like if I'm not taking it literally, it's hard because I've took it literally for so many years. So when did man first become man in that? So like there's the mother has the baby and the baby has the soul, but the mother doesn't. Like, do you know what I mean? Or the spirit or whatever it is that God breathes. When is it accountable for its actions? And
Well, we
when
could
is it
go even
conscious?
further though and take like Sam Harris's argument about, forget who it is, but the guy who shot a place up, and when he was arrested and he was gonna like be put to death for some big shooting, he said, I don't know why this happened, and I wasn't thinking this way until just recently. You should do an autopsy on my brain. And
Okay.
we executed him and did an autopsy and found a tumor in a part of a brain that completely explained away that shooting.
Okay.
If that tumor hadn't formed, or if he'd gotten medical care sooner, he would not have shot up that building. So even as a fully developed adult, is he fully responsible for that? Or responsibility? Is Eve really responsible for what she did? Why was that fucking snake in the garden? You check and see why was the snake there. It goes back and it's like, oh, well, Lucifer fell. Well, why did Lucifer fall? And so if I were to ask you that, why did Lucifer fall? That's the beginning of all this.
I've read the first chapter of Paradise Lost, so I am prepared for this question. Well, pride. He wanted to be like the Most High.
Where did the pride come from?
The ether. I am not sure.
Someone might say he was too beautiful. As the most exalted angel, he was too beautiful and pride stepped in. But whose fault is that?
Well, I guess God for creating him to be beautiful.
Yeah. And so if we go right back to the beginning of every single problem, it starts with Lucifer and it all chain reacts down from there. Now, we could look at it from the way Peterson says. Is your room really clean enough to criticize society? When it comes to evil, I realize that my room is not clean enough to criticize the very nature of reality. The Tao contains the yin and the yang. The Bible's all based on that split of Saint Michael and Lucifer. Did God make a mistake? Has it all been one big mistake from that? Because then it's all God's fault. He screwed it up at the beginning. Or is this all what is supposed to have happened? Well, what meaning is there to anything without the good and the evil? And we can look in so many different ways in the Tao, in all kinds of things. There is no pain without pleasure. There's no hot without cold. There's no good without evil. And Peterson will explain perhaps some of the purpose of evil when he says that if you're just innocent and incapable of doing harm, you're not good. You have to be capable of doing harm. You have to realize you're a monster, and you have to choose to control that. Then you
but then when did we do that in our evolution of our?
Well, when did you do that?
But I'm concerned with it. But that, regardless, I overcame that because I said I can't answer it. So that's why I just decided that's not a conundrum for me to solve, is what I decided.
And also it's like
only God knows, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And like with everyone, I go into everything assuming everyone is wrong in some way about everything.
Okay.
Like when it comes to the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth that people swear on, nobody has the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Right.
We're all mistaken in ways we can't even understand.
Right.
And like, have you ever heard of Donald Hoffman's work?
No, the name sounds familiar.
His is like a theory of reality where he says if you play through game theory and evolution, it shows for him that he guarantees there's a 0% chance that based on evolution and game theory, that we would have evolved to see reality as it is. We would have evolved to see fitness payoffs. And his theory is that reality, just scientifically, cannot be what we experience. And he says it's very much like the desktop. Like what I'm experiencing here, all these little icons at the bottom, that's not really what those files are. Those files are all sorts of
like data.
connections, yeah, and switches that flip. And this is all made so I can interact with something in a meaningful way, but I'm not seeing the reality of what's going on in my computer at all. He says that science, cutting edge, leads us to show that we have no idea what reality is. We're all existing within an interface. And so what's behind that? It's beyond our knowledge.
Oh,
everybody's wrong. And that gives you a nice, comfortable place to be like, okay, so we don't have to be so hard on each other. We're all wrong to varying degrees. And sure, I've spent a bit more time on mindfulness and am aware of more that I don't know than so. You know, some people think they know things. And well, this is something Madness taught me, is we're all hallucinating reality. If you're always hallucinating a very stable reality, you will think you're living in reality. But go nuts for a while and you'll realize you can be surrounded by the same reality and go to another dimension. It's amazing the flexibility of how one can experience whatever this interface is. And actually, I've tattooed on my chest the old Black family motto. It's non crux sed lux, which means not the cross, but it's light. And I love that. It was already something I'd come to, and when I found out it was our family history, I've made it part of a tattoo. And it's just, I don't even believe in my idea of God. I believe in whatever the fuck's actually there. And I know that it's beyond me, and I embrace that. So I'm not going to pretend I know anything, because then I'm not going to learn anything new. As soon as you understand something, you stop investigating it.
Isn't that a line from Socrates? Like, the more I learn, the more I know, the more
I know I don't know.
No.
Yeah,
the more I know, the more I don't know. Yes. And that's,
if you look at like your
wisdom.
Understanding as like a circle of light growing in the darkness, where the darkness is the unknown, the chaos. The larger your circle of understanding grows, in fact, the more darkness you're aware of. When you only know this, you're only exposed to that little encounter. Oh, I just don't know this. Then you learn more. You're like, oh, I don't know this. Then you learn more. And then it gets to where you're like, oh, okay, this is an infinity type thing. And reality is much stranger than I thought it was before. And I actually have no idea what reality is. I have no idea what I am. I mean, get high and watch The Matrix, and you can have a nice experience of being like, oh shit, I don't know what's going on. Yeah. And like like Joe Rogan likes to think of it in the Elon Musk way. Maybe we're in a simulation, but the way I saw it long before I ever took even that idea seriously is that's a good metaphor for what reality is. There's higher, more basic levels of being that emerged out of God, and that consciousness appears to keep developing additional layers of density. And from the perspective of heaven, even if this reality is as physical as it seems to be, that's a small, more limited version of reality, just for the sake of developing consciousness within limited experience.
Well, have you read C.S. Lewis's The Great Divorce?
No.
Oh, really? It's a really short read. It's only about 100 and something pages. And it's where they're in, it's sort of like a weird hell type, purgatory-ish type place. And the guy just like, he's just there. He wakes up, his eyes open, and it's like, he's you. Like you're experiencing this new world, and it's kind of shadowy and cloudy, and you're not really very solid. But then you're at a bus stop waiting for a bus. You get on the bus with the rest of the passengers, and you hear their stories a little bit. And then you go up to this place, and it's so solid. It's so much more solid than you are, that the grass hurts your feet. And then some people come down from the mountains, the metaphorical, they come down from the mountains, and some of them are wearing clothes but appear naked, and some of them are not wearing clothes but appear like they are wearing clothes. It's a weird sort of, I was just watching Jonathan Pajot. Is that how you say his name?
Yeah.
Pajot.
Pajot.
So he was doing a talk about the fool, and but that's not really here nor there. It's more about, did you see that?
Yep.
He was talking about being clothed in glory in the garden. And so I think that's what Lewis is pulling from, they're clothed in glory. So they're not naked shamefully. They're so clothed in glory, you can't tell who's nude and who's not, but they're so complete that you don't have to worry about it. So they're like giants, these types of people. So they're coming down, and what it basically is it's all metaphorical for heaven, and you get a chance to stay, but lots of people are choosing to not stay. Conspiracy theorists, like there's a guy who's like, this is all like, this is not real, man. You know, exactly. Like I just come to scope out what's like getting more information. So there's that guy. Then there's the guy who's got to lead a Bible study back down in the shadow place. He's got to get back to his musings on, you know, Job or whatever. So, you know, he's like, I just come here for vacation, so I'm gotta go back, you know. And then there's the one who's too obsessed about seeing her son who passed away, and that's all she cares about, rather than, you know, the divine or whatever. So it's really, really very interesting sort of way of looking at heaven and hell. And is hell even hell? Or those who, some, very few, but some do choose to stay, and you kind of watch their difficult process of the refining in the fire sort of thing. And so what was that place for them? Was that purgatory or was it hell? Well, if you choose to stay, then that was purgatory. If you go back, then it's hell. I thought that was kind of a tricky, kind of interesting thing that Lewis did there. So I like that. I think, why did I even start talking about this? I don't even know. But reality. Yeah, real. So that's the idea, is that we don't know. I mean, when Jesus is walking through walls after he's resurrected, is it because he's a ghost and walking through the wall? Or is it because he is more real than the wall?
And I think another way, because it seemed like when you were talking to Paul, you often brought up, well, what do I do with these atheists who say? You brought that up repeatedly. And what the feeling I got was, it's not important what you say to them. What's important is what you say to whatever the sub-personality within you is that has these questions. So I saw that the reason you brought it up repeatedly with Paul, I sense in you, and I know a couple other people who are this way. They keep coming back to, well, if I was on Joe Rogan, how would I get him to take these mystical or religious ideas seriously? And I think that's just that. And like within myself, I have a sub-personality that's an atheist. It's a part of, like Peterson says, a way to think is to have different internal parts of you with different perspectives. And by having them interact with each other, larger things emerge. So I saw that it seems you're struggling with that idea of how would I explain it to them, is that there's some struggle within you of, how do I mix my desire to have scientific understanding with my faith in a way that doesn't destroy either of them? And I find, if you look at, like the Bible says that God spoke all this into existence. That's like the language of the beginning. And this all comes from the word of God, right? And if science is studying this phenomenon, which is the word of God, then science itself would be something God is saying to us. I think God's voice is multidimensional. God, and the way I look at it is, God speaks to me through absolutely everything. The myths I encounter, the people I encounter, my inner nature is God speaking to me. But science is also God speaking to me. And it's just different ways of deciphering something beyond our comprehension. So one person searching for truth may, through meditation, look inward and find the word of God written in their heart. Another person looking for truth might go through a scientific lens and find the beauty of the understandable equations built into reality. And that's also
Mm.
part of the reverberations of God's voice. They're just looking at a little tiny piece of it and not looking at the rest. And so I would say God has spoken to you. First, God spoke you into existence and everything around you. And like
Well,
Peterson says, be honest, be your version of good. Don't worry about what I think's right or wrong, because I'm wrong about something. What does your heart tell you should be doing? Listen to that, you
right.
tune your senses, and then God shines forth. There's too much reality around you to process. So your mind will start picking up on the things. And if at first your conscience isn't tuned properly, or you don't understand properly, and you're making a mistake, honestly make that mistake, and reality will correct you. If you honestly make the mistakes built into you, and watch for how it goes and learn from them. And then the things that are naturally come to you, and that when you explore them, unfold beautifully and lead to good things, follow that path.
Well, I just watched a video that is on your guys' channel on how, I think it's how things that Peterson gets wrong about Joseph Campbell.
Yeah, the video Ryan did.
Yeah, it's about the follow your bliss, which has been massacred by our modern sort of, I don't know, wine moms, like, or whoever it is. Follow your bliss. But I really liked hearing the comparing and the contrasting, and the idea that it's not as shallow as it sounds, the follow your bliss thing, that Campbell, what he was kind of more referring to is that story from Nietzsche, is he's kind of like talking about becoming a camel. You start off as a camel. I can't remember why. Something about being a child, and then a lion, and then a dragon, and how we've got to sort of balance this. It's for Peterson's like, you can't do away with society. That's what Nietzsche was suggesting, but Campbell was, I guess, more happy for us to turn into that dragon in the end. Whereas Peterson was like, well, we can't turn into the dragon. That's chaos. but I like the idea from Campbell's perspective. It's a little bit more optimistic, and it's a little bit more like, it's not just follow your superficial. I thought that's what follow your bliss meant. And it seems to be more about look for the meaning and follow that. And if you keep on trying to like adjust towards that, then that is like, it might feel like you're wrong, but it's in the end it'll get you where you need to go, I guess.
Have you read The Never-Ending Story?
You know what? Okay, I haven't, but I did just watch a YouTube analysis of it.
The book's brilliant, and you could read it to your kids, actually. Like, it's a wonderful kid's story. But
yeah, I know the story from the movie. Like, I definitely watched the movie when I was young, and I just watched this YouTube, which I know sounds kind of silly, but like it really called back all the memories. And I almost, like, I totally started like tearing up with Atreyu and his eight tracks or whatever the name of his horse was. Yeah, and when he like died in like
swamp of sadness.
Swamp of sadness. Like, that was a swamp of sadness, and it just, and he was like,
That's
don't.
Depression.
Oh, is that what that is?
That's the magical realm of depression. That's like, if you look at Fantastica, or sorry, in the movie it's called Fantasia.
Oh, okay.
But in Fantastica, it's like there's different realms, different locations that to me are different states of being. Right. That we can shift in and out of. And yeah, the swamp of sadness that's what depression's like. When depression
that made me just like, it's hard. It's one of the saddest bits of cinema I've seen.
Yeah, and depression is that fatal. It's that fucking sad that if you lose it, we're losing more and more people to it.
Right.
The horse sinking, the real world equivalent of that is when someone finally slits their wrist.
Yeah.
And it's that dangerous that mythically, the idea of going through the swamp of sadness is a better description of the experience of depression than to describe it the way a doctor would. Of the
really?
That's
so I interrupted you. You were telling me about the never-ending story. So
okay, right. But the problem with the original movie, and the author, in fact, tried to stop the movie from being made because they decided that the story was too big to put into the movie. So the movie's only the first half of the book. It's 26
Did they do a second
chapters.
one? Did they do a second movie though?
The second movie doesn't pick up the story properly. From what I remember. So the movie ends with he gives the childlike empress her name and he saves that last grain. And she gives it to him. And in the movie, she gives him Orin. And she gives him the power to make whatever he wants and like to remake Fantastic. And when he looks at the back of Orin, it says, do as you wish. Sounds like follow your bliss, right? So he goes, okay, I'm going to go out and do whatever I want. And in the book also, one difference from the movie is he's a fat kid. So he's very unhappy, but he's also fat. He's ugly. He's lonely. And so right away, he makes himself this fit prince with a dark complexion, just remakes himself. And he goes around making these wishes that are the superficial, follow your bliss. But every wish he makes takes away a part of himself. Kind of like when Peterson talks about looking at a small child and wanting to take away all the pain, then you realize you'd be taking away their humanity. And eventually you'd have something that isn't them. At the very end of the book, he realizes it's do as you wish in the sense of deep down, discover your soul's true wish, not these superficialities. And at the very end of it, he uses it like at the last final thing, he finally realizes he needs to go back to exactly where he was.
Right.
And he comes back to the real world in the same body, goes home to the same father. I think his mother's gone or whatever. But suddenly everything's different because his inner nature is different. He got the experience Jim Carrey says he got of, you think you want to be rich, you think you want to be famous, and you get it all and you're still miserable. And that's when, he had his little, some people look at it as a breakdown or an enlightenment. And he was just, I've heard him say, I wish everyone could get everything they want so they would learn that's not what they really want. And that's the never-ending story. It's follow your bliss. And if you think your bliss is cocaine and gambling and hookers, sure, follow that. You follow it long enough and you'll find, oh no, I didn't want that. That has taken me somewhere I do not enjoy being. Or whatever else it is. If you think your bliss is social recognition, go ahead and, like, who is it who said, oh, you want a fool to become wise? Just let them persist in their folly. The same way that, to say, how do I get an atheist to take the idea of God seriously? Well, what if I was delusional and I thought I could dig to China? Now, you could argue with me and you could pull out globes and deal with whatever nonsense I bring up to counter that to try to convince me I can't dig to China. Or you can hand me a shovel and leave me alone and I'll dig until I realize I can't dig to China.
That's interesting. I've never heard that one before. Very practical.
Well, yeah, the digging to China one I just made up on the spot.
I love that. Well, I was oh, sorry, what were you going to say?
Go ahead.
Well, I was thinking about, it's not quite the same as asking for whatever you want, but the idea of going through two experiences, but you're changed from one and you do the second one better. I remember so I have 3 kids. And so when I had my first, I did not prep enough in regards to mentally or read anything. And I just remember feeling like, oh my goodness, this labor is happening to me. And it was happening to me and I wasn't, you can't really control it, but I wasn't with it. I wasn't there for it. Like I had to be there for it, and to me, it was something that was happening to me and it was horrible and it was hard. And again, yes, it was my first child, or my first labor and my first baby that I was having. But with the second one, I read a book about how to look at it. And it's Ina May's Guide to Childbirth, if anyone's interested. And I looked at it like it still hurt as much. Mind you, it was much shorter because my body was like, I remember this. But it wasn't happening to me like I was out of control. I was there for it. You know, my mental space was, this is good. This gets the baby out. This is good. I didn't, you're not even supposed to use the word pain because of the negative connotation. So I'm like, good waves or good, you know, whatever. So I framed it in a way that was like taking it and like using it, as opposed to it's happening to me. And it kind of reminds me of what you're saying about like the sort of empty wishes, and it's same experience, but he went like, or even not even the empty wishes, actually his first life before the book. I think his mom dies or something, and that's why he's particularly sad.
Yeah, and that made his father distant.
Yes.
Yeah.
Same life, but then eventually he goes back to the same life.
And he's grateful for it.
Changed because of the hero's journey. And that's why I love stories. Because it changes you.
Yeah, and what you said about the childbirth thing, I find is similar to me for all the downsides of being bipolar. And so it's similar advice I give to other people in a suicidal state. And reminds me of something Peterson said, that you engage an entirely different aspect of your neuropsychology when you engage in something voluntarily. So if you're afraid of spiders and you're forced to look at a spider, it's traumatic. But if you choose to expose yourself to the spider, it's still unpleasant, but it's different. And when I first went crazy, it was, no, I can't be crazy. Please, God, take this cup away from me. It was fighting. I do not want to do this. This is being done to me. Whereas instead, voluntarily accept it. Like, take the cup. Decide it's not being done to me. It's being done for me. And I don't know what ways it's serving me yet. And you managed to find it. This is being done for me. I want this child. I will engage with this voluntarily. And the same pain, you could handle it differently. I find it's the same thing with my suicidal depression. Wow. This is something I'm being asked of by God to do. And people will often, when they talk to me, people often use me like a priest or a shaman. It's just like what flows out. And it's off. Some people have this drive of, I want to know what God wants me to do. And I find it's clear when you look at someone else in the right frame of mind. Well, what is God asking you to do? What are you dealing with at the moment? Like, oh, you're a drug addict trying to get over, like God's asking you to do that. You have children, God's asking you to be a parent. You have a deep artistic drive, God's asking you to do something there. We often don't find God because we don't look low enough.
There's still small voice, right?
Yeah, but essentially God's asking you to be you. You have your nature and you're in the environment you're in. That alone will tell you, without anyone else explaining it, if you observe deeply, what God's asking you to do. And I've been asked to be one of one of Pajot's holy fools, or in some of his other talks, he talks about the people at the margin, the dog-headed tribes that bark at the edge of chaos where the monsters are.
Yes, he was just talking about that. Yeah.
Mythologically, I'm one of those. I'm a dog-headed man. I'm completely outside of society. I'm in my own dimension. And God's asking me to be one of the ones tending the border. And there's bigger monsters past this that other people don't want to deal with. And
you're like the gateway? Are you like you're the gateway to, like, you're standing between us and the other monsters a little bit?
Yeah, in a couple different ways. Can
you hear me?
Yeah. I'm closer to the monsters than some people. And in fact, I'm close enough, I feel a kinship to them.
That's so interesting. I watched most of that talk. I still have to finish it, the one on the fools that Jonathan did. And I am just fascinated by the outskirts of the society. It like the idea. Now, are the shaman and the fool sort of related in a way?
No, because, or sorry, I don't know how Pajot would put it. My first thought, I'm sorry, like I assume this, I don't understand the truth. My first thought on that is no, because the shaman was an integral part of society and really wasn't a fool. The shaman early on, it was a much more basic society. The fool seems to be more a response to a more developed culture. Although I think I have that nature of the holy fool, the nature of the shaman, I have both of those.
Did the shaman become more like a fool eventually?
The way I see it in Western society is the shaman got cut up and devoured by others. Like once the shaman was the source of science, of art, of all culture, learning, language. It was the magic and the science with the healing. We cut that all up into science, mythology, art, religion, and we've divided that all. So to me, yeah, we've cut up the shaman and spread them out. So if you looked at it alchemically, what society's done is there's the solve and the coagula. First, you take something and separate, find all its basic essences, and you refine those down to the perfect state. Then you recombine them in, like, you isolate, you dissolve, separate everything into its parts. Or like to fix a clock, first you take it apart into all the little gears, you shine up, fix each little gear, then you put it back together. As a society, we've divided the shamanic principle into a variety of things. You know, Shakespeare was doing part of it, Isaac Newton was doing part of it, Peterson's doing part of what a shaman did. And eventually, perhaps we can put all that back
divided together. Yeah, okay, that's what I was going to say. Is it too divided and it needs to, is that part of where the meaning crisis is coming from, do you think? It's too divided?
What arises in me at that is to say the meaning crisis is arising because we're approaching the time for the solution. There's a stage of human evolution that's approaching, and where do solutions come from? Problems. So naturally, the meaning crisis is arising so that the solution can manifest. It's being done not to us, it's being done for us. That so we can have this experience.
Well, that's what David Fuller, I'm looking at my notes. David Fuller mentioned someone who was, what is the name of that? The guy, something about, shoot, I can't.
Wait, well, you look that up.
Ken Wilber. That's the.
Oh yeah.
You know,
Ken
he was talking
actually, Ryan, we have on our channel, Ryan did a quick interview with Ken Wilber.
Okay, so he has a theory, and I can't remember what it is.
Integral theory.
Integral theory. Yeah, or integral, or however you say it. Yeah, and he kind of talks like that. The idea of the solution, it's after postmodernism. Mm-hmm. It's whatever comes after postmodernism. He might have a word for it. I don't remember, but David Fuller brought that up.
Yeah, tier 2 thinking, and it's the integral stage.
So you're like, see, I look at it as a crisis, and you're looking at it as the precursor to the solution.
Well, this is all one big, wonderful thing going on. It's one long process.
Right.
And this is the process of developing. This, or in fact, this is like, to go back to Christianity, you know, at the end, revelation, whatever all that psychedelic trip means, but essentially heaven comes down and the final city's being built. Yeah, this is the process of building something like that.
Right.
Oh, and we go through all these stages, like Ken Wilber points out, we go through magical thinking to mythical thinking to whatever, and then modern, and then postmodern. That's all a part of the big process. And we can see it happen with the universe itself. Like at first it was just hydrogen and whatnot, and then things coalesce. That was even those first stars forming and the first time certain elements formed. That was part of this. meaning crisis. That was part of laying the foundation for all of this to grow. It's one big, wonderful unfoldment. And if we can choose, because certain things come down to, I don't know that we have, like, I agree with Sam Harris that free will is hard to find. It's one of these things I think is paralogical. In one way, no, like obviously we have no free will. We're the way God made us, in the environment God put us in. We come out the way we do, and we're just, it's an illusion. But at the same time, I think there's something to free will that is mystical, beyond my comprehension. And if it's anywhere, it's that this reality is made in such a way that God's denial. Or the way in like stories, the way if you don't believe in a unicorn, you just see a horse. And in that world, it's like there's a free will as for the characters to whether unicorns exist. In a lot of stories, does magic exist? Like when I talk about doing magic, or when religious people talk about miracles, that seems to be deniable if it exists. And God seems to be deniable. Like, I don't think these atheists are lying. They don't perceive God. And it's that this reality is built in such a way that it seems we have free will to interact with it in a variety of ways. The same way that you might be colorblind, or you might have that condition where you only see the right half of things.
Yeah.
Depending what eyes you have, the visual could be so different. Depending what basic axioms and intuitions you have. It seems reality will respect that. If you choose some axioms in combination with some natural intuitions, there's no God, you perceive a reality where obviously there's no God. And also I think the idea, you got to decide if God's good or bad. You got to decide, aim for the good or not. Also, you got to decide to just be honest, like just blanket. Like that's one place Sam Harris and Peterson agree. Just be honest. But again, it's like these things seem like almost like a setting in a video game where, okay, I want to experience it this way. I want to experience it this way. So,
that's so interesting. I'm going to
remember that. So if you want to experience a hellish reality where you can turn against the creator and fight to the death, you can have that experience here. You want to experience a reality where you're lost in a meaningless soup of science, you can have that experience. You want to be honest. You decide God's good and beyond your understanding, and you want to engage in the world that way. It begins to unfold that way. And part of it is the way the psychologists and all the scientists say, where what we aim at defines what we see. What we understand alters what we see, what we expect. That's all scientific. But I also think there's something to the spiritual and synchronistic level. So if you believe all people are evil, not only will you be able to walk by a good person and not see a good person, you'll see an evil one, even if a good person's there. I think you'll also draw more evil to you. And you'll be drawn to more evil. And your phenomenological experience will be a reality where everyone's evil. A lot of what I've learned to do with madness is to take off as many of those filters as I can. Accept the basic God is good. And so I define things with everything. It's not happening to me. It's happening for me. Including, like a few days ago, I had the suicidal equivalent of like what a panic attack is to minor anxiety. And I've gotten to where even within that, I can go, and this is happening for me, not to me, and I don't know why, and I don't need to know why.
And you're for the better, it's for the better for it than if it's happening to you? You found there to be a huge difference?
Entirely differently.
Okay.
And when you're not at war with it, also coming to peace with it, you're mindful with it, you accept it, you can sort of reduce it to its symptoms. Stop adding meaning. You stop attaching to every thought, so don't feed it. The way Sam Harris talks about anger. When you're angry, be mindful of it. If you don't go along with it, it dissipates. I find I still have the same amount. Okay, sometimes I can have a storm inside. Instead of calming the storm, you learn to step back and become the blanket awareness. And it's sort of like part of you rises above, but it's still there. And I've gotten to where I can be fully depressed. Like right now, I'm depressed. I've got this black hole of depression inside me that I'm not at war with. It's just the frozen part. And with that acceptance, I can open a greater space. And there's another part of me and other subpersonalities active right now that are very pleased to be talking to you and that feel very optimistic at the moment for humanity, in fact. Like with what I see sometimes of people online that makes, oh, we're going to hell in a handbasket. Talking to you, it just makes everything I was just saying about this is all a process. It's going beautifully. I can really see that every crisis at the moment is good. There's solutions coming. And I can have pleasant experiences while being depressed now. I can have far more vast internal experiences.
I see. Okay. That was a really good explanation. I like that. I'll have to, it's hard to explain where you're coming from. Well, for anyone, every experience is unique to them, but especially for when someone hasn't experienced the thing that you are experiencing. So it's, yeah, you have a clear way of explaining where you're at. So
good. I was just rambling, and at the beginning of every sentence, I didn't know what the end would be.
Yeah.
So I'm glad it made some sense to you. And speaking of experience, one thing I was curious when I listened to you talk to Paul was, do you have any direct experience with God or Jesus, or like, is your faith all an intellectual understanding? Because me, I interact. I have an angel I talk to on a regular basis. I experience God. I have a personal relationship with Jesus. I can enter meditative or ritual states. And perhaps I'm doing what Carl Jung did, of accessing internal archetypes. Perhaps I'm really talking to saints and angels. I don't know. But phenomenologically, I talk to saints and angels. I look at Alan Moore once wrote, and Peterson said something similar. But Alan Moore said, the one place that gods and demons inarguably exist is in the minds of men, where they are real in all their grandeur and monstrosity. And Peterson has said, whether or not God is inside or outside you makes very little difference as to whether or not there's a God. I've realized that, and I'm not defining it sharply either way at all. I don't know exactly what my angel is, but the more I interact, my intuition tells me it's more than just an imagination. So there's sort of the dogma sides of religion, and there's the mystical sides. I'm very much, insanity's led me to be mystical and shamanic. So I have plenty of firsthand experience with mystery and with other entities. When you talk about Jesus, is he just a concept for you, or is there any
what else is there
direct experience?
So I'll say, so to start, I'll say the mystical is very new to me. So I mean, the most real experience, memory that I have with the divine, and again, this is I don't really know.
Actually, that's too personal. You don't need to share this.
Oh no, I don't mind. Not at all. No. It just sounds like such a silly story, but whatever. So I was 5 or 6. No, I was probably around, we'll say 5 or 6. And we were coming home from Awana. I don't know if you know what Awana is. No. It's like where you just like, it was a kind of evening club at church where you like do games and memorize verses and get prizes. And you could earn like little things on like a crown to, whatever, and you got to have prize at the end. So I what did I do? I had this little, this is so silly. I had this little Polly Pocket that was a ring, okay? And I had the little girl sat in there, and the little Polly Pocket girl fell out, and like when we got back, and we couldn't find it. My mom and my sister and I were looking for it in the snow, and some random dude. I was young, so you know how anyone who's bigger than you is old, but he seemed like young-ish, maybe 20s from my child memory. And he's like, "Hey, is this what you're looking for?" And we're like, "That's it, thank you." And then my mom said that when she like turned around, the dude was like literally gone. And like that was it. That was the story. Like I know it sounds so like okay, he could have just like turned down the street, but I don't know. And my mom's gone, so I can't even get a clarification on the story because I haven't talked about it to her in ages. But I, for me, that was the literal. It wasn't a feeling. That was a literal. That person passed my Polly Pocket to me. So, and it was dude, like they were small, and it was like it's Alberta, right? So it's in the like winter, and it's dark. It's it's 7 or 7:30, but it's dark, and we parked in the back alley. So this guy, I kind of with that the size, it's like this big. So the size of it alone seems like a miracle that some dude, like it's a guy, some guy found it anyway. So that is my, I think, my encounter with like entertaining angels. So that is my that's that.
And
But as far as do you have
that seems
any
to follow the
questions?
rule that I mentioned earlier of it seems to be, it needs to walk that fine line of being like deniable. I noticed how even as you were telling it, you were going back and forth between, okay, it could have just been a coincidence, but it was so small that it makes me want to believe, but I also realize maybe.
Yeah.
And one thing I've actually found for me is it seems that the fact that I'm insane and that I'm the dog-headed man and I'm the fool part allows my angels to interact with me more because there's more deniability involved with me. So if a bigger miracle happened to you, or Peterson, he's more respectable. If he tells people about that, it can have a larger effect. If I come running into a room going, I just saw an angel and it told me this. Well, I'm legal, like I'm a lunatic. I've been in an insane asylum. It adds that level of deniability that someone could go either way with that. Well, right. I know he's just crazy. But what he said was, and so I find that for me, I embrace the discrediting aspects of myself. I'm a nobody. I'm just some lunatic. Nobody has any reason to believe me.
Well, I think I would say, like, I'm going to sit on the side that it was, but like in the end, I do think there's something about it. But so that's that. But I have had a very, like, my mom was very like discussion oriented. So we talked, and also with my father dying when I was so young, we talked about heaven a lot. And, I remember discussing it and thinking about it and thinking about infinity at a very young age. I probably like 8 or 9, really just really thinking about, but that's kind of young for a kid to be thinking about infinity. And I mean, I even remember, this isn't really divine, but maybe I like thinking, it says standing in my basement, and when I was probably around 10 or 11 and being like, how do I know anyone? I know that I'm real. How do I know if anyone else is real though? And I'm like, hello, I think therefore I am. Descartes beat me to the punch for that one. But I thought that was, I do have a very heady version of my faith, because it makes sense. It makes sense to me. It has to make sense. But I mean, I've had periods of time where, I think, when my mom was probably gonna like die because it was cancer, and I knew I didn't have any control, but I just didn't want to let that go. And like the cup passing, you know, I just kept on being like, pass it away, you know,
Yeah.
and pushing it away. But I actually, you know, I remember accepting it and it feeling like that was very real spiritually. But I it's all, but for the most part, like I've had times in my life where I could feel like, you know, I could feel the spirit. I can feel inside like, oh, this is the alignment of, I guess, the Holy Spirit sort of lining up with what you know is right and you're supposed to be. But I think we all have there are different ways of knowing, and mine is probably very similar to my mother as well. So I think so my mom, she taught at this little college in the middle of nowhere, Alberta, called Prairie Bible Institute. Have you ever heard of it?
No.
PBI was Prairie Bible College. And so it's just one of those it's kind of updated, but it's very old school Protestant conservative, whatever. But so she was like she taught people how to teach children like the Bible. And so but she's also very, very like, she was very well studied, and she would always look up original like Greek and Hebrew in the Strong's Concordance and in her, you know, Vine's word studies and stuff like that. So I feel like I kind of took after her a bit, even though I'm fine with evolution. But there are aspects that I've sort of taken. Particularly, I remember her giving the example of about for God's will. Like, how do we know what God's will? Because, you know, there are some Christians who are like, but I really want to make sure I'm in God's will. And they're so afraid of being outside of the will of God. And she would look at it from a very practical, well, you know, Abraham set out not knowing where he was going. And then at the end of that, he said, I being in the way, the Lord led me. And I've just sort of always approached my life in that way. That's sort of how I connect with God in a very, like, I think that, you know, sometimes, like, I remember once I I misplaced, you know, a ring that was my mom's, and this is after she'd passed away. It was like an opal ring that was her birthstone, and I, like, you know when you are frantically looking for something and then you pray and then immediately you find it. I mean, there's
You pray
that.
to St. Anthony for something lost, or?
Well, I didn't. No, I meant pray to God. I'm Protestant, remember? So I pray.
Catholicism, St. Anthony's the one you pray to.
Oh, okay.
Misplace something, and it is just shocking how many times that's worked for me over
Well,
my whole life.
it's, and I don't do it right away. It's always the last, and then I don't want to say the second, but within a minute, usually I find the thing. And again, plausible deniability. You could say that was a coincidence every single time, or you can be like, well, every single time I pray that. So there's those moments where I do have that, but I feel like it's a very sort of practical, making sense in my head kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And I also like with me not having a father, I do feel that with, you know, like Jesus being my heavenly father, like that, I definitely, like, he's the best. So
and do you get a sense of presence?
You know, like I said, there's sometimes during really emotional times, mm-hmm. Usually if it's sad, you know, but I don't always feel that, but I do know. It's like a knowing, because sometimes, you know, there's that, like you said, like there's the doubting, you could call it like the doubting Thomas, or like the atheists in you. Mm-hmm. That's like, but really, like, how do you know? How do you know? And I'm like, well, I don't know. I just believe. But it's because I'm like, okay, well, what if I decide not to believe it? You kind of do that thought experiment, and I'm like, but it doesn't seem right. It just doesn't seem right to me. It doesn't sit well with me. And I feel like I'm using even I feel like, as opposed to I think. So there's a sort of, even if I take away reasoning it away, I've sort of reduced it down to well, you don't know. So I'm fine to say I don't know that Jesus was the Son of God who died for our sins and came back to life. That's where the part is that I believe. That's the me believing it. That's what faith is. And I'm just doing a leap. And I kind of want to get more into the realm of that's why I think that the archetypes and the story is sort of my, okay, do you watch Star Trek at all?
Yeah, I haven't in a while, but I loved the original series.
There's this, okay, did you ever watch Star Trek Voyager?
I might have seen a few episodes. I watched.
Okay, see, I'm
Next
like, okay,
Generation.
well, my mom was a Trekkie, and therefore I am a Trekkie. I watched all of them.
Awesome.
And so what was that?
I said awesome. I love nerdy shit like that.
Yeah, me too. I know, I love Lord of the Rings. Like that's my ultimate. But so back to Star Trek. There's this. So it's on Voyager, and it's so Janeway is the captain, and her second in command is Chakotay, and he's has like Native American origins. And even in the 24th century, you know, there's he has this spirituality about him from his people, and she wants to go on a vision quest. Like, well, he suggests that she does, because they get flung into the Delta Quadrant, which is very far from the Alpha Quadrant for those who don't know about the Delta Quadrant. It's very far. And so she's like, okay, what are we gonna do? And he's like, well, maybe you need to go on a vision quest. And so he had this like sort of box that I think was technological, but had been in the family and whatever. And so so she's like me. She's well, I don't know what this is, but I'd like to try. And she, you know, touches the box and says the word, and he says the words with the incense and the whatever. And then she's like in a, I don't know, like by a waterfall, or she's in a forest, and then like the first animal she sees is her vision quest animal, and I think it was a gecko. Anyway, so and then I don't remember what she ended up doing with that at all, but I feel like I'm kind of there, like the story, like the hero's journey, and these sort of archetypes and these things I'm learning about how important stories are to people. They're more important than some people give it credit for. You know, like I don't want to say it's more important than science, but it's very important to human beings, these stories. And I think that that's sort of the gateway for me that I'm very interested in walking into and like leaning into. And I think that might be the gateway to spirituality more than where I'm at, like the mystical realm. So I guess I'm looking to go on my, like, oh, here's my vision quest. And like, you know, I'm meeting Mr. Cozy Beard Shaman Man. And you're like telling me about the dragons beyond. And I'm like, oh, can I do this? Can I go? And that's where I'm at right now.
Yeah, and when it comes to sort of that Joseph Campbell hero journey, I feel like I went through that story myself. Like I went through a personal hero journey, but now I feel I've settled into, I'm not the hero in the stories going on in the world right now. Like, so say for instance, Lord of the Rings. I'm that guy who's half bear, or is it Radagast, the wizard with bird shit in his hair out in the woods? I'm one of those weirdos.
Yeah.
Half monsters in one realm that just sits where I am. I sit in one place exploring the extent of my being, and heroes wander by and stop in.
Wow.
It's like with Ryan, I find like he's asked me to help him out and sort of that. Like with Ryan, I'm sort of, he's the hero. When I interact with him, I see he's on a hero's journey, and that, yeah, I'm one of those weirdos at the edge of the world that, you know, you just sit there in your own dimension, quietly living out your own way of being, and every now and then a hero walks through who needs to sit and heal, or needs to hear some story, or needs some access to the realms of chaos that I'm sitting at the border. And they come in and we talk for a while, and then I wish them the best on their journey.
Cool. And I find that the more I learn about what these symbolic things mean, the more meaning I find. Like I love it. It's my bread and butter. I love it.
Yeah, and what could possibly be more meaningful than the quest for meaning?
Yeah.
So why is the meaning crisis here? So that you can do the most meaningful thing possible. There's no meaning crisis around you. You couldn't be going on this hero's journey.
Right.
It's all being done for you. Also, for the wisdom hidden in stories, one book I've recommended to a few people, and no one's regretted it yet, who's picked it up. And I think at some point, actually, we might have a couple audience members on to talk about it, but is Alan Moore's Jerusalem. It's a really long novel. It's like
I think I've heard Paul talk about it.
It's like 1,200 pages.
Oh my.
And it's one big novel, but I remembered you saying to Paul, who's going to tell a new kind of story? And I think Jerusalem is the first book I've seen that seems to be a tier 2 level of thinking. It's not the next story on its own, but it taps into that. And it's by Alan Moore, who he was a comic book writer. Initially is where he started out. So he wrote Watchmen and V for Vendetta and all these things. But he got tired of the big business industry at one point, and he just refused to work. Like, he basically stepped out of the limelight, only worked with small publishers, became reclusive. And he, like me at the age of 40, took magic seriously. And Jerusalem is a book written by a practicing magician at that point, where his goal is to magically change the reader through the book. So, like, many stories change us, but the artist isn't trying to do magic. They're just doing art. And they naturally tap into a magical process. Jerusalem's different. It's a magician, fully aware that art is magic. And using it to enlighten the reader. And so it's just a fictional story, but it is amazing the way some of that story can change the way you look at the world. And it's an integral story. It doesn't exclude other people's stories. Like, you can the Bible's within it. Like, Christianity exists, the Bible's in there. But also at the point you'll see an Islamic in the afterlife who has done a suicide bomb. Like, the reference to it's everything is in this story, and he's trying to alter your ability to perceive reality through the book.
Wow, it sounds like a drug trip almost.
Oh yeah, that would be a good way to describe what he's trying to do. Another thing he's done since taking up magic is put on like psychedelic live shows. And there's a really great album he recorded called The Highbury Working, where the entire point of it is to create a psychedelic, like the concert, a mixture of the words being spoken and the psychedelic music to absolutely alter your state of consciousness. And in fact, Alan Moore used psychedelics in his magic early on, regularly.
Wow.
Like, he's somebody who had used psychedelics before. But once he started taking magic seriously for all his early rituals, he would take psychedelics and as a way to open up to the other dimension. I think I've heard him say that he doesn't do that as much anymore.
Okay.
He doesn't need the fireworks of it. He doesn't. And I found the same thing with myself. A couple years ago, I was doing magic more, where I'd really get into an altered state of mind through breathing and meditation. And like, I was having these phenomenologically, I'm not saying anything like to someone else, I'm just sitting in a dark room. But to me, it was just like out of a movie, like bringing, angels coming to life and like having these amazing experiences. I still know I can do that. And in fact, like, it seems psychosis can be exercised, I found,
Mm.
through
Mm.
ritual and active imagination. And kind of like a dog, you exercise it and it doesn't get destructive and over. So there are time periods, where I'll go into the fireworks of magic just because I notice I'm pretty manic. Reality's starting to get pretty magical and shimmery. I'm like, okay, I've got to do like a little bit of heavy magic work tonight, spend some time with some angels and exercise it. But yeah, it's the insights hidden in that book are incredible. So as daunting as it is, Jerusalem's an absolutely amazing read.
Okay, I'll definitely look into it. You've sold me on it. So,
Excellent. And if you do ever read it, I'd love to hear your thoughts on it, especially
absolutely.
with your solid Christian background that's somewhat different. Like you are exposed to a different type of Christianity than I was. I'd be curious how the book lands on your ears.
Totally. Yeah. Well, I mean, I've been meaning to. I'm so bad at like following through for reading because I have 3 boys that are very busy. But I will put it on the but really read this one list. So, yeah.
And this was a lot of fun. We rambled all over the place.
Yeah, it was great. It went by very fast, but I can see it's been like 2 hours, is it?
Yeah, we're at 2 hours already.
Good
yeah,
for
it
us.
went by fast and it was fun. That's how I ended up sitting here almost peeing my pants. It was fun. But it just went by so fast that all of a sudden I noticed.
Well, it's so good. I hope that I think I pulled it together. I think I pulled the likes and the ums back without thinking about it too much, just at the beginning.
I think
so
we
we'll
both
see.
did, actually.
Yeah. Well, when you're engaged with someone and talking about things you really love, I think that can help. And you forget the camera's there. That's my favorite, is forgetting that the camera's there. So I feel like I kind of did that for this one because I like this stuff.
The majority of this, I forgot we were filming.
Yeah, which is kind of, the authentic part. But I guess should I just send you, I can just send you like my channel information and my Twitter and stuff if you want to just put it in the description. Like,
yeah, just shoot that to the channel email. Either Grizz or Ryan will handle uploading this and putting in the description.
Okay,
links.
I'll just write them back because they'll be. I mean, I can it's my Twitter handle is Andrea Lynn Lewis, but I mean, people won't remember that. It'll be, if you really want to follow me, friends, that's where I hang out. It's Twitter. But I would really appreciate your subscription onto my channel because I'm less popular there. But I mean, if you're gonna do one or the other, it's my channel. It's funny, Twitter, I find it easy to get to kind of get a little following because it's easy to just say things that are like, oh, that was interesting. But on YouTube, it's just Twitter. Oh, really? Well, on YouTube, it's hard because there's so much content out there. People, you're in a flood.
See, I really don't know anything about any of that. I haven't used any social media in years. I used Facebook a long time ago for a while. I've never used Twitter.
You are a hermit, like a hermit from technology.
Yeah, and even I don't know what it's like to build a YouTube channel either. Andrew had a YouTube channel. Right. He asked me to take it over. I didn't know what to do with it. Ryan took it over with me, and all I've ever done is shown up and like
do the talk.
Someone sends me a link. I click on a link to show up to any conversation. Everything else happens, or I know how to go live. And that was difficult for me to figure out at first.
I've only gone live twice, and it's very difficult. Like very.
Oh well, no. At this point, I think I've done over 20 live streams.
Well, good for you, because mine. Well, actually, okay. My first one was okay. My second one was horrible because my husband was downloading a video game at the same time as me trying to go live, so it was just taking up all the internet bandwidth, and so it was just very choppy. And I didn't realize that was happening. So everyone's like, "You keep on breaking up," and I'm like, I don't know. So hopefully the next one I do will be a bit better, but there's a sort of learning curve for the technology side.
Well, my live streams are like quality-wise are horrible. Like there's lots of good quality shit Ryan puts up, like especially the very first live one. we had like a problem when we were first starting the channel. And I was up late one night and it was on my mind. And I thought, like Andrew used to use the channel. He said, go live. Going live helped him work out his thoughts. And so I thought, I'm just going to go live right now, see if anyone comes on, get some feedback on the first video. And then I'll just I'll just delete the live stream after.
Mm-hmm.
And people asked me to leave the live stream up. Like when I said I'm going to take this down after, people were like, oh, would you mind leaving it up for whatever reasons? And so I left that one up. And a couple other live streams, I went on thinking I'd pulled them down originally, and people asked me to leave them. And it's an amazing, like, it's not a huge audience I get, but it's an amazing quality. Like I will just, I go live, what I agreed, like to give a chance. Sometimes I just go on live randomly. But if anyone ever really wants to interact live, I said that I would go on every full moon at midnight, that I would just do a once a month thing. And I tend to lose track of the calendar, but I notice the moon. So every full moon I go live. But it's horrible lighting. The camera I'm using now doesn't work when I go live anymore. That started glitching. So I'm using the built-in camera on my computer, which is even worse quality. And I'll go live with bad lighting. It's coming through horribly. Also lately, when I go live, there's these weird beeping and tweeting noises in the background.
Oh, wow. So
that is something to do with the internet connection. I don't know what, but it is so low quality compared to what Ryan puts up. And I go on with no preparation. Sometimes I just wait to see what happens. When I have nothing to say, I just sit quietly and wait for a few minutes. And we'll let things build up.
Good for you, man.
I follow none of the rules of broadcasting. And I'm in no way trying to present anything. I'm not worried how I come across. I'm just showing up because I said I did. And I get very, very, very little trolling whatsoever. And
well, that's probably because you're going in as you, and consequences be damned, and it'll maybe be good, and it usually is.
And I think it's funny because it's kind of like Pajot said, where sometimes when the world goes upside down, walking upside down puts you upright. And so all of the things I'm doing on their own should all be wrong. That shouldn't work. But I'm doing it in the world's so inauthentic at the moment that just being authentically horrible at this has this immense value to this small group of people.
Yeah.
It's this weird inversion where I can just stumble through this in whatever way comes naturally. And people are pulling some value from it because other things have become so superficial and fake, putting on like so much persona. Also, some people have remarked that the slower tone of some of my more depressed live streams, that it's a nice break from the constant dopamine. Like so many YouTube videos are feeding dopamine hits and
like
quick edits. It's flashing. It's, trying to get those emotional hooks in you. Right. When you were saying about putting in the, what we can put in the description, I also never get around to doing any of that. Like and subscribe. I don't do any of that whatsoever. But somehow this is working. But so I have no idea what it's like to make a YouTube channel. I was handed a running YouTube channel. I also did not learn how to use it properly or do it properly. I'm stumbling through in a way that shouldn't work. And an audience was present just because the channel was there and people noticed it. So I put no work into anything here. This just happened on its own.
Well,
it came from me forming a relationship with God, where as I sort of learned that my place, I went out and was a hermit, totally disconnected from the world for a while. And I got this understanding with God that that was what I was supposed to do. And I didn't need to worry about anything. I just put out there that if anyone wants anything from me, God will send them to me. And that beyond that, I don't have to worry. I can just be, just tend your own little garden quietly. And if the universe wants something from you, it'll ask. You never have to go looking. And that has led to me doing this channel.
Well, I've heard that tend to the garden you can touch. That's like that. I've heard that quote from a comedian, Duncan Trussell. I think he's a Buddhist, but anyway, he quotes that, and I like that. It's very it puts in perspective where we should all be.
Also, that's the clean your own room. Like, just worry
Mm,
about that first of Peterson. And it's like when Paul Vanderklay was saying, just live it. Yeah,
mm,
just be it. Just do it in your own immediate environment.
mm-hmm.
Just be the best you. And if the universe wants something from you, it'll ask. You know, the same as your kids. If they want something, you'll be able to tell just by paying attention.
Mm. Follow your bliss.
Yeah.
Oh, I like that. Oh, I have so many things to think about from our chat. Thank you so much for having me on. I really like what you guys are doing with your channel.
Yeah, this was really fun. You're really easy to talk to.
Oh, thank you.
Especially like that comment of how many Red Bulls did she have? I love that about you. Like, this is easy. When I am tired of talking, I just wait for a moment and you have all these wonderful things to say. So if you ever want to come back on, also in the future, once Ryan has more time, I'm sure he'd love to talk to you as well.
Yeah. Well, I'll have to look at this book and see if I can get, I don't know about reading all of it. Maybe I will, who knows, but maybe when I look at that, I can come back.
Yeah, if you ever want to talk again for any reason, people are always asking me to do more content for the channel, or if you ever want me or Ryan on your channel, you can let us know. Also, if Grizz can set it up, he's going to work on setting it up so I can go live with people in the future. I don't know how to do that shit, but once he has a new computer and, I don't know, something about OBS or something.
I use OBS to give me tips.
So if you wanted, we could go live sometime. Because I find the conversations I have with people that get uploaded tend to get less views than my Lunatic lives.
Right.
It's
okay.
a draw to going live. So once Grizz has that worked out, if you wanted, we could go live on my channel sometime so that you could get to know the audience. And
sure.
That might get you more subscribers than this video does. But
sure. Yeah.
If anyone watched this far, yeah, I should ask this for our own channel. So like this.
Right. Yeah. Like this channel and subscribe, people.
Yeah, so both channels and Paul Vanderklay as well.
Yes.
And if anyone wants to hear more of Andrea on the channel, I'm sure she'll check the comments here once we put it up.
Yeah, ask me questions. I'll answer them.
And
but yeah, so, I'm trying to be more focused on the community being built, you know, by people who are engaging in a way that, like, it doesn't have to be agreeing with me, but like in a way that can challenge or can push or can bring about different ideas. I don't want to just be like, oh, I just want lots of subscribers, and then, because even if you get lots of subscribers, they might forget about you. I am excited about building a community and of people who are interested in these kinds of things. So
yeah, and I found the audience that's formed around my content is amazing. Like atheist views, Christians, people with strange, you know, pagan beliefs, crazy people, you know, sane people, people studying psychology. It's an amazing mix of people. But in the space, like around me, there's not any argument. It's fine for the atheist to be an atheist and to discuss their perspective, and it's fine for all the various believers. And there's like a nice space of just communicating with each other without debating anything or pushing anything on each other.
Yeah, that's good. Good little crew you've got around you.
All right, so was there anything else you wanted to say, or do you want to wrap this up now?
I think I'm good. I gotta go make my kids lunches for tomorrow. So.
All right. Well, I hope you have a great night. It was genuinely like wonderful talking to you. I'm not just being polite or anything.
No, yeah, I loved it. Oh, yeah, no, us Canadians, you gotta watch out. No, I believe you. Yeah, and it was same here. I loved it. Really, really enjoyed it. It was great.
Yeah. So just reach out anytime.
For sure. Yeah. I'll look into that book and get back to you.
Okay, fantastic. And for anyone watching this, I hope everyone has a great night.
Oh yeah, you guys. Yep. If you made it this far, thank you. Thanks, Mercury.
All right, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, for sure. See ya.
Bye.
Bye.